Welcome to 10th or Tuesday for September 13, 2016. My name is Michael Boldin. I'm here live from Los Angeles along with
Michael Maharrey, or Mike Maharrey if you prefer. Or just
also in
Mr.
LA as
Maharrey.
the joke also in LA as the joke goes, right?
Yes, in the Lexington area.
All right, three topics I want to cover today, if we can get to them in our 10-ish minutes. One, there's a step that states can take to push back against the Federal Reserve. Second, Mike, this is an article that you covered recently, some documents that have been revealed documenting or covering the massive amount of spy gear that's flowing to local police departments. And third, this weekend is, and they're celebrating it, I guess, a day early, is Constitution Day. And maybe let's actually talk about that one first, because I think it's really the most interesting in some ways. First of all, because, well, obviously, Constitution was signed September 17th, 1787, so it makes sense to me that there would be some kind of remembrance or celebration, or I guess technically a mourning of sorts.
Right.
What Independence Day should be, not just a bunch of dudes going to the beach to drink a bunch of beer, but actually thinking about the founding principles. Well, back in 2004 or 2005, I think it was 2004, maybe it was implemented starting in 2005, George Bush signed an unconstitutional federal act with an unconstitutional federal mandate to unconstitutional government schools to teach about the Constitution. But Mike, as you know as well as I do, they're only teaching Constitution trivia, like how many senators are there? How long do they serve? How is a Supreme Court justice appointed? They're not talking about the founding principles, the essential principles that make up what the Constitution is, or what it was supposed to be and what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. And there's the irony can't be lost on the unconstitutional act to celebrate the Constitution. That's absurd. But really, I guess in a sense that's fitting, because the Constitution has become little more than a political prop for the most part. It's a parchment under a glass. It's a piece of history, and for most people, sadly, it doesn't have any real meaning beyond platitudes.
And that's what we see just about all the time, and that's what I think Constitution Day really is a platitude. It's the government telling us that we should learn about the document that they decide that they're going to determine how it's interpreted or read or how it applies, and that's totally opposite. So for us, of course, and we say this every year on Constitution Day, and I also don't celebrate, I guess, New Year's Day, because it's amateur day. So for constitutionalists, Constitution Day is amateur day. For us here at the TAC, Constitution Day is actually every day. But one of the greatest ways that they're violating the Constitution on a regular basis these days is mass surveillance, Mike. In this article, what was it actually called? Like, local cops have have access to a mind-boggling list of spy gear. You reported on this from some documents released by The Intercept on how all this gear that's flowing to local police departments.
Yeah, exactly. What it actually is a catalog that's put out by this defense industry contractor. I believe it's based in England, actually. And this catalog is being circulated around state and local law enforcement. And it's like 120 or 128 pages of spy gear that's available to state and local police. And the array is amazing. I mean, it's everything from the stingrays, which are essentially spoof cell phone towers that force every cell phone in the area to connect to it. The article mentioned that some of these things have the capability of actually gobbling up every piece of communication over a huge, broad area. And then it was even things like these miniature cameras and actual surveillance gear that's hidden in things like garbage cans that the cops can throw on the street corner, and just all of this extremely intrusive technology. And the thing that I found most disturbing about it is the fact that police departments a lot of times can obtain this type of thing without anybody even knowing. They don't even have to go through the regular budgetary processes because they get these grants from the federal government through different programs that the Department of Defense, Department of Homeland Security offer.
Right.
And so they get these things with absolutely no oversight. Sometimes even local governments don't know that the police have these things. So in the article, I pointed out 2 steps that your state and local governments can take to help limit these things. And the first is simply require transparency, require that any local police or state police unit that gets any kind of surveillance equipment has to go through the local governing body in order to do it, and require public hearings just to get this stuff out in the open. And of course, that'll limit it to some extent because when people know about it, they don't want it.
Right. Well, at least I would say that actually, even if every single time the local government, which are often just as corrupt as the state or the federal government, they're all just extremely corrupt people in government, except for a very small few. Even if they rig the process, at least there's an opportunity to actually put a stop to it.
Right, exactly.
And an opportunity is better than zero opportunity, and that's similar to what New Jersey passed into law last year, Mike. And maybe we don't really have to talk about it a lot, but this was kind of the concept, the baseline, the foundation for this type of approach on militarization of local police. There's a law in New Jersey now that says, hey, before any local government can get like a Bearcat or like a tracked armored vehicle, they have to have an open discussion on the local level, letting the community know, public notice, things like that. And I think that's the small but a very important step forward.
Exactly. And really this is the surveillance equipment is an extension of police militarization. It's the same thing. It's a bit more of a specific niche, but it's the exact same type of thing. You've got federal government, federal funding, getting local police to buy this stuff, and then information sharing. All of this data ends up in these huge federal databases. So step 1, get the transparency, and then step 2, specific limits on these specific pieces. We talked about the stingrays, and we have model legislation for this available. Basically, require warrants, require the information to be held onto and not shared, and this will vastly limit the opportunities for the surveillance state itself to grow.
And The Intercept had actually a follow-up maybe of sorts on this type of reporting just this week, and I haven't read it, but they released, it was maybe 200 pages of documents on stingrays and their use and instructions over the last 15 years. And I've only skimmed that. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it yet, but I can only imagine how deep this goes. But these stingrays are extremely dangerous. The federal government actually instructs local police to just disavow them, lose any court cases, just kind of bail out on it rather than kind of talk about really how they're using it or where they acquire it. So we know that they are, we don't want them. So, did you get a chance to look at that, Mike, over at The Intercept?
I have not seen it, but Kelly Sladek, who is one of our TAC volunteers who does a lot of work in the surveillance area, she messaged me today and said she's looking at it and doing some research into it and is going to try to do some reporting on it. So,
okay, well, let's at least link. I know you're going to write the blog for this after we're done here with the show, but let's link that so people can actually do some research and maybe we can get some feedback from some of the viewers on some of the important points in it. I'm not sure if I'm going to get through 200 or 150 pages of research on stingrays anytime soon.
Same.
One of the other things that I wanted to cover today is the Federal Reserve. To me, is it's like a nasty mosquito. I mean, maybe a swarm of them. I don't want to belittle the danger, but it's something that never goes away. No matter what we're talking about, there's always the specter of the Fed that's causing problems. If you're thinking about, well, hey, they're paying for all this spying equipment based on grants. Well, if it wasn't for the Fed just printing up money or devaluing the currency, this kind of helicopter money type of thing, or controlling interest rates, maybe they wouldn't have the budgets to do this type of thing. So the Federal Reserve is kind of that dark cloud that hangs over everything that's unconstitutional or immoral from the government level. And J.P. Cortez, and this is something we published a couple of weeks ago, on one specific action that states should take to help advance sound money, Mike. The idea that as long as you actually remove taxation on gold and silver, it can become more free-flowing, because the roadblock that's there from taxation actually discourages its use as money, and that's a big step that states should take to push back on the Fed.
Yeah, I think that's really the first step that needs to be taken at the state level to get rid of both the sales tax on the exchange of gold and silver, and then also the capital gains taxes. And I love the analogy that Cortez used in that article. He kind of made the analogy: if you went to the store and took a dollar bill and got four
Right.
quarters, they charge you a 7% tax on your quarters. And that's essentially what they're doing with gold and silver, because gold and silver is literally money. And so by removing these taxes, it incentivizes the use and opens the door for this for gold and silver to be used in actual exchange for business transactions. So it's a great first step that states can take, and relatively easy when you think about the policy. It's really.
Here's how he put it in the article. This is one of the lead paragraphs in the article. He says, try walking into a local precious metals dealer in more than 25 states and exchanging 20 Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, we'll just call them, I know the viewers understand what that is, for an ounce of silver. If you do that kind of money exchange instead of breaking that $5 bill for singles or quarters, you'll get hammered with a sales tax. And certainly, if you just want to say, hey, I want to swap out this money for that money, if it's going to cost you 10%, the odds of you actually using that as money goes way down. So in half the country right now, there are state and local laws that actually discourage the use of gold and silver, sound money, as money in day-to-day transactions. So removing that, it's a small but very important step. Without that, any other larger step like the Texas Bullion Depository that's being built that will also facilitate exchange of metals electronically, without removing that step in some states, or at least about 24 or so, you're not going to see gold and silver used as money at all.
Exactly.
Or very little. I mean, except for like us diehards that are into it
Right.
and say, all right, well, it's kind of the operating cost to,
Right.
to teach people about this as money.
And I think it's important to note, we talk about small steps like this, and they may seem inconsequential in the big scheme of things when you look at all of the overreach and all of the things that are going on. But these little steps, talking about this surveillance, getting that transparency, talking about sound money, getting rid of these taxes. These small steps tend to lead to bigger steps, and they create the discussion in the legislatures about these issues. And there's an important educational process that goes along with the actual legislation itself. So, I want to encourage people not to belittle or think, oh, that's just a small step, no big deal. These small steps are extremely important because they pave the way and open the door to the bigger steps that can come in the future.
All right, so that's my segue before we close out here for the week. Mike, any small steps or interesting projects you're working on right now that people should know about?
Well, I just finished up a article on hemp in Colorado, and they just took another step forward in their development of the hemp industry, and it really illustrates how these small steps grow into bigger steps. So we'll publish that here, I guess, in a few days, and that'll be just yet another example of these things. And then I've also started working on the next installment in our Jefferson letters.
Oh,
and,
that is cool stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it's going to delve into this idea that Jefferson wasn't even in the United States during the Constitution.
Oh, this one drives me
Yeah.
nuts. So anytime, and it's funny to watch Mark Levin on his Levin TV, he's got a picture of Thomas Jefferson over his shoulder, maybe on every episode, but I've seen it. I posted on my Facebook a little while back a screenshot of that because I thought it was fascinating, because anytime we quote Thomas Jefferson, whether it's Mark or anybody else who doesn't like the idea of states taking action on their own without some kind of national consensus to support them, which means nothing ever happens, of course, the status quo remains. Anytime these folks oppose us and we quote Jefferson and say, well, hey, Thomas Jefferson is a pretty, as far as the Constitution goes or the founding, is a pretty reputable dude. They say, well, Thomas Jefferson wasn't even in the country when the Constitution was signed. Besides my initial gut instinct response of, well, neither were you, pal.
Yeah, right.
I think Thomas Jefferson was widely respected as far as the Constitution. And you and I know as well, Mike, that James Madison looked at Jefferson as kind of a sage, a guide of sorts. And I'm interested to hear what you dig up, or to read what you dig up on this next series of letters between Jefferson and Madison. I don't know. Is there somebody else that we should know about?
That's the primary that I've looked at so far. I'm still doing some research, and there are a lot of them. Jefferson and Madison corresponded frequently during the Philadelphia Convention. And,
but I mean, Jefferson had no knowledge of what happened there, right?
Yeah, other than these in-depth letters that Madison was writing him.
We'll do a full one of these episodes on that, because I think this is absolutely absurd that someone would say, I mean, even any human being alive that was involved in any way during the time of the founding probably has a better knowledge of it from back then than you or I or Mark Levin or anybody else, because they experienced it. We're just trying to research to understand what they understood. So to discount someone like the author, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, one of the first presidents, is, I think, just it's trash. Anyway, so I'm really excited that. But any ETA on when that one's going to come out?
Like I said, I'm still gathering up the letters. That's actually the hard part, is figuring out which ones to publish and reading through them and kind of deciphering the flow of information. So I'm still working on that. Once that gets done, the writing process is pretty quick. So, hopefully surely in the next month. I say that.
Okay, awesome. Well, we make all of our ebooks available for free for 10th Amendment Center members. If you have not signed up, it's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. And it's the other way around. If you're already a member, go to members.10thamendmentcenter.com. You can log in, get all of our videos, all of our ebooks, download them for free, and please feel free to share them with as many people as possible. And we're going to get the information out and hopefully educate people on the proper role of the government, whether it's Constitution Day or, I don't know, Labor Day, whatever. So thank you so much for watching 10th or Tuesday for episode 3. We'll be back next week for another episode of exciting stuff with Mike and myself.